There we go.
All right. So because we're doing the workshop on managing burnout holistically, it's only appropriate that we talk about, okay, what is burnout? Maybe it's become this buzzword for a lot of people. They've been hearing it come up. And so there's one thing I wanted to start with when talking about this idea of burnout, and it's specifically that burnout is not reserved just for certain individuals. I think this myth was going on for so long. I think when burnout started, it was about 1970. That was when the term was coined, and there was this idea it was just for like kind of high performance people. I remember even a story with myself when I was I don't know, a kid or a teen, and telling my mom, like I'm stressed out, I'm burnt out, and
Mhm.
she's got her job, she's got kids to deal with, she's got the house, taking care of the house, all that kind of stuff. And she said to me like, "What do you have to be stressed about? What do you have to be burnt out about?" And that stuck with me for a while of like, oh, maybe burnout or stress is reserved for certain people. Absolutely not. So this is something that whether you're in a high performance job or not, that burnout can definitely resonate with you. It's something that you can experience. So burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. So exhaustion is that key word there, caused by long-term involvement in physiological demanding situations. So basically, you're in situations that are exhausting, that are hitting you on many levels: physical, mental, emotional. It is holistic as it affects multiple areas of our being. So when we go to do solutions, as you'll see, we're going to approach from that holistic perspective. It is a product of living in a state of continual stress. Maybe that's another word that, as I say that you are even just reflecting on right now. Like stress is something you're like, yeah, this is something I'm experiencing now, or I know when certain situations happen that I experience stress and it just impacts me. Some people say it impacts them to their core or their bones.
Mhm.
They feel tired, right? And so stress is this big piece, right? And there's two kinds of stress. One is eustress, which is positive, and distress, which is negative. Nigel, if you want to go to the next slide there. So positive stress is short term. The example they had for this is picture, your man LeBron James, and he's getting fired up before a game, right? There's a sense where adrenaline's going to be pumping, he's going to be fired up. That is eustress, right? It's excitement. It's I'm ready to go, right? Negative stress can be both short term and long term, but the difference is it leads to feelings of anxiety, irritability. There's even when you experience it for so long, you get into this apathy, feeling lethargic, even a sense of depression. So the big point here that we want to notice is that burnout is depletion. It depletes us to our core. And so maybe reflect for a minute or so, like, are you depleted? Do you feel this sense of depletion lately? Does this resonate with you? Right? Just give a sense of what's going on there. Yeah. Go ahead, Nigel.
So we're going to be setting the stage with this topic of burnout using our five pillars here at Soul Care Christian Counseling. That is the uniqueness of this workshop. We're bringing you guys in what we do with our clients, what we use to support our clients. We offer them what we call as a soul care plan, which includes these five pillars of spiritual care, mindfulness, body care, self-love and acceptance, and community. And through these five pillars, we're going to go on a journey of how we can manage the stress, manage burnout in our lives. Really quickly, when you look at these five pillars, which one resonates with you right now? Which one have you been working on personally with yourself? Which one do you want to start working on personally for yourself? You can come off mute or you can put it in the chat, whatever is comfortable for you. Which one of these is standing out from you? I see body care. I see body care and self-love. Yeah, yeah. I'm big on that one too. The self-love and acceptance. That's something that I'm like working on as well. And mindfulness.
Do you find
And
it helping you, Nigel? Like, do you find it helping in maybe those areas of stress or burnout? Do you find really diving into self-love and acceptance, that it's beneficial.
Yeah, and I think for me, like self-love and acceptance and partnering that with the mindfulness, it allows me to really go deeper and understand how things impact me personally and how that impacts how I see myself, how I perceive myself, how I interact with others. All of that, intersects. And I think that's also the beauty of the five pillars. It speaks to the holistic nature of a person, that spiritual care, the mindfulness, the body, self-love and acceptance community. It speaks to all of that holistic nature of the person and how to show up and be your authentic self in different spaces that you're in.
Looks
See
like we're
something
getting a
else?
theme. Yeah, we're getting a theme of body care and self-love and acceptance in there.
Yeah,
Something that people are
community. Yeah, yeah.
right?
Okay, that's great. That is great. So let's continue this. Let's continue.
Uh, so burnout and spiritual. I want to be mindful. So we are like, if you can see on the screen there, soul care Christian counseling. So we do come from a Christian perspective, but I wanted to be mindful of people in the chat. You might be from a different faith. You might not practice faith at all. So one thing that I realized is kind of common between a lot of us in terms of our language is this idea of the soul. And the soul can be seen as this idea of it's like the very core of our identity. It's what makes you you, right? And so we think of burnout, we ask ourselves the question, does burnout really affect us at this deep level? And I want to share a quote from a guy named Gabor Mate. I probably botch his name every time I say it, but he says, what do all these stressors have in common? Ultimately, they all represent the absence of something that the organism or person perceives as necessary for survival, or its threatened loss. The threatened loss of food supply is a major stressor, and so is for human beings the threatened loss of love. The one thing that really stood out to me is burnout, therefore, is a symptom of spending so much time in what we call survival mode. Maybe that's something that as I say it, it's giving you new terminology to be like, oh, yo, that's how I felt. I haven't felt thriving. I've just felt like I've been surviving. And it's being without what we need to actually thrive, to get out of maybe the pit that we're in of just feeling burnt to our core. And so I asked myself this question when I was doing this, like, what does this have to do really with this idea of my soul, right? And what came to me is if our entire being, right, is in survival mode for these extended periods of time, it's this indication that, oh, something inside of me is feeling not safe, really at my core. And as we experience stress at this level, it impacts our nervous system, which impacts our organs, which impacts our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our values, and even our identity, right? You might feel that sense of um, just it again, it impacting you at all levels, right? That is focusing on the soul. It really hits us. One of the things that I realize it hits us pretty deeply at, and this will make more sense. This is why I love body care. That was my answer. And so I'm gonna be, you might see me smiling or be excited at this one, but this is burnout and body care. The one thing I wanted to mention at the start is burnout is more than just feeling tired, right? It's more than just like, oh, I'm tired, I have to take a nap. Burnout hits us at our most vulnerable level. What I have here is the diagram. We're just going to stay here for a second. This is called the window of tolerance, and I made it a bit more simple for us to be able to just take in. So whether you want to take a picture of that, Nigel, I think we might be sending out be sending out the slides as well. Okay, so you'll get this in the slides or you want to take a picture. But there's this idea of up, down, and feet on the ground, right? Feet on the ground is where we want to be. This is where we feel safe, empowered, resilient. We feel like we're operating in our most optimal state. Like I'm good to go here. What many people feel as they're in those places of lack of safety at work or there's just registering a threat is that up category. That's maybe where in your body, again, you start to feel this anxiety, this panic, irritable, you're distressed, maybe even that sense of anger. And what happens when you spend so much time there is boom, you go down. So first you're up and then boom, you go down. This is maybe something that some of you can resonate with. You've just been in that anxious and panicky and stressful state for so long that now you're feeling a sense of numbness, unmotivated. You're feeling maybe apathetic, right? Maybe that neutral or really feeling in a sense depressed. This is all happening in your body. Go ahead, Nigel. So what's really going on here with you? Again, maybe this gives you some ideas of, oh man, something is going on with me, is that burnout affects our bodies, starting from our nervous system all the way to our emotions, thoughts, actions, and even our physical bodies, right? That's where people maybe feel tense or even stuff going on in their chest, right? This is how we know burnout is impacting us even at a body level. So being stuck in stress system, what's going on there is adrenaline starting to release, right? Cortisol starting to release. You're going into that fight or flight. This is where, after so long of being in there, you feel tired. So that's something you're feeling. You think, oh, I just want to avoid everything. You act in a way of like, I'm gonna isolate. I get home from work and I don't want to do anything. I just want to go to my room, put on Netflix and just chill. And then even the physical part is one of the big things is stomach issues. You might feel those stomach issues from being in stress for so long. So what we really want to think about here is, as I've kind of laid that out for us, is that, yeah, you know what? Burnout does affect our body, right? Maybe, again, some of you are feeling it right now. And one of the biggest things I want you to get a sense of in this burnout and body care section is that understanding our bodies is one of the best yeah, one of the best and first steps on our way to healing. Right. I see someone say here, I feel it in my stomach mostly as of lately. It's been showing up as migraines and headaches. Yes. Stress and being in that adrenaline state for so long will impact us. You know, it'll manifest in our physical bodies. So we want to understand what's going on with our bodies, and that we do by something called the bear in the woods analogy, like my man Leo and the Revenant there. And I want to explain it as this, and hopefully this is an analogy that you all can take to be able to again bring that awareness. So picture yourself in the woods for whatever reason, right? Maybe Nigel, are you there for camping? Are you a camper, bro? This guy said no. So picture yourself in the woods for whatever reason, and in that moment, a bear crosses your path, right? What's going to happen is your body is going to react at that nervous system level, right? It's going to go, oh, we're in threat, and that adrenaline and cortisol is going to go up. You're going to be in fight or flight, right? There's a few other ones, freeze and fawn, but most likely fight or flight. And what happens there is, as you scare the bear off or as you run away and there's no bear anymore, your body's going to regulate. It's going to be like, oh, no more threat. We're going to turn off this adrenaline. We're going to turn off the internal alarm and we're going to be good. Go back to Nigel roasting marshmallows or whatever, right? What happens with burnout is your body is registering that there is a bear in the woods, even when you're just at work, at home, maybe you're hanging out with friends, maybe you're at social engagements. Your body is reacting internally as if there is a bear in the woods. So that adrenaline is up, that panic is up. You're in fight or flight mode. And as you spend so much time in there, that's what's going to deplete your system. So what do we do about this? Here's what healing looks like. We need to be aware, just adding a few people here. We need to be aware of how our body reacts to certain stressors, right? Realizing, is there a bear in the woods? So if you're hanging out with friends or you're interacting with a certain coworker at work, notice what your body is doing. Is it giving indication of, oh, there's a threat here? My adrenaline's going. I'm feeling anxious, panicky, irritable. So that first part of awareness. The second part is removing ourselves, if we can, because it's not always easy, from these environments. So this is kind of removing ourselves from those situations where bears come up, right? Sometimes you have to get a little creative because we're not all just going to go out and quit our jobs. But what does it look like to shift things around, right? The third one we do is train our bodies. This is one I go through with clients all the time, is train our bodies to realize there are no actual bears here. And we can do this by a few different ways. So these are kind of the takeaways: is eating and sleeping in a healthy, consistent way. So getting that energy, getting that nutrients. That also comes through getting enough exercise. So we're exercising, our body's getting some movement, we're stretching, that kind of stuff. Then there's also some cool techniques like doing breath work. This is something you can look up online on YouTube. Just type in beginner breath work, or even releasing muscle tension. And what these are going to do is they're going to tell your body, hey, as I'm working on this, I'm relaxing my breath, I'm releasing my muscle tension. It's going to tell your body, oh, I guess there's no bears. So it's going to actually regulate. It's going to come down. And then the biggest one, rest. Get some rest when you can. Take care of yourself, right? Go ahead, Nigel. Yeah. So the takeaway here is implementing these techniques is again going to help turn off or regulate our stress system. It's going to reduce those panic hormones, and it's going to allow us to come back into feeling better. Right. What I have included in the next slide is just some of these things that are impacted when we're in stress mode. And when we come out of stress mode, these are some of the things that come back online and we can experience. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, GABA, that's going to be in your notes. So you can look at that and just realize, okay, when I'm taking care of my body, I'm bringing these things back online. Go ahead, Nigel.
So let's talk about burnout and mindfulness. Burnout and mindfulness. So here's a working definition when we talk about the connection between burnout and mindfulness. So it is the deterioration or the impairment of our psychological well-being and functioning resulting from factors such as stress, exhaustion, emotionally or mentally, being overwhelmed by work or life responsibilities, and it can impact our quality of life and interpersonal relationships. All right. So there are three areas that get impacted from burnout: exhaustion, interpersonal relationships, and inadequacy and failure. So this is where we are. The first one is where we are feelings of being drained, unable to cope with the responsibilities and emotions, and sense of detachment or numbness. Right. So when we are thinking about burnout and how it connects with mindfulness, we are feeling drained. We don't feel like we have the mental or emotional capacity to do the things that we once found easy to do, or to even think about doing the things that we once found easy to do. One of the things that where exhaustion shows up is in our daily routines and tasks, right? Some of us may have morning routines, some of us may have nighttime routines. Burnout has the power, the ability to impact that and make those things seem super hard. All right. Here's another area that impacts is interpersonal relationships. This is where we see things like communication breakdown, social withdrawals, an increased conflict, and a lack of empathy towards ourselves and others. Burnout impacts how we see ourselves. It impacts what we think about ourselves and also towards others. Okay, and when we think about that aspect of our interpersonal relationships, that feeds into community, which we're going to touch on later. How we show up in our community. Burnout impacts how we show up with ourselves, and how we show up with others around us that we are also in relationship with. And then inadequacy and failure, unrealistic expectations, chronic stress, negative self-talk, a lack of recognition or validation. This is what burnout does for us when we are talking about that in relation to mindfulness, how we see ourselves and how we communicate towards ourselves. One of the things I said in our workshop last month was in context of joy, and I think it's fitting in this one, that burnout impairs us. It impairs our vision. It impairs how we see ourselves. And if we can't see ourselves the way we are supposed to and need to see ourselves, that means our actions towards ourselves are also distorted, are also impacted. Okay. So, talking about burnout and mindfulness, in order for us to manage, in order for us to challenge burnout, it requires self awareness. Right. And I know self awareness may sound like a uh, big word. I know it may sound like something that we aren't completely aware of. But in the book, Six Pillars of Self Esteem, Nathaniel Brendan coins this term critical consciousness. And I'm also going to break that down a bit later as well. And one of the things, I know it looks heavy there, but one of the things to notice in what he says right at the bottom. Critical consciousness is the process by which we reflect from an interrogative standpoint on our awareness of reality, right? This is where we are questioning how burnout has been impacting us. This is where we ask ourselves some hard questions. This is where we hold ourselves accountable. This is where we check in with ourselves and say, hey, am I burned out? And if I am, what's causing this? What is contributing to this burnout? What am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? Or what am I not doing that I need to start doing? This is where we are asking ourselves questions in terms of how is burnout impacting my day to day reality, my day to day life, my day to day routine? How is burnout impacting that? How is it impacting that? All
Nigel,
right.
we have
Yeah.
a we had a comment here
Okay.
that says someone says I feel like burnout causes me to put up a barrier against joy. Sometimes good might happen, but I don't allow myself to feel happy or feel too exhausted to be happy. Any thoughts on that as it fits in with mindfulness?
Yeah. Could we repeat that? Because I don't see it on
Yep.
my end here.
It says, I feel like burnout
Mhm.
causes me to put up a barrier against joy. Something
Wow.
good might happen, but I don't allow myself to feel happy, or I feel too exhausted to be happy.
Yeah.
Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. Burnout has that unfortunate ability and power to create narratives for ourselves that we believe, core beliefs. So when we are experiencing something good, these core beliefs rooted and created by burnout combats against that and tells us, you don't deserve this right now. You're too tired, or you didn't work hard enough for that, right? It impacts how we see ourselves, how we show up, and how we receive. Wow, that's good. Yeah. Burnout impacts how we receive joy, how we receive compliments, how we receive validation. As I said earlier, it impairs our vision, it
Yeah,
externally and internally, and also it impairs what we hear.
yeah,
I could tell you the greatest things about you, but burnout will filter that and cause you to hear something completely different.
yeah,
I hope
yeah,
that makes sense. I hope that
yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great question. Great question. Burnout mindfulness. So here are some things we can do to address burnout, emotional burnout with mindfulness. Validating your emotions. And I think this speaks to that question we just had. Expressing self, needs and wants, having realistic expectations of ourselves. Burnout challenges all of those things. It prevents you from actually validating your emotions. It prevents you from expressing needs and wants. It prevents you from setting realistic expectations. And one of the central themes around emotional burnout is the fact that we feel the need to please everybody else around us except ourselves.
Yeah.
Burnout is the catalyst for people pleasing, right? When we don't want to experience burnout, or when we don't want to experience disappointment, rather, burnout will show up, right? To avoid disappointment, we will burn ourselves out. We will say yes to that thing. We will say yes to people, all because we don't want to experience disappointment. Okay. Here's the next thing: addressing physical burnout with mindfulness, self-care. What do you do that fills your tank, that fills you up emotionally? What do you do that allows you to check in with yourself. All right. I was in a session 2 weeks ago. And one of the things about being in therapy is that sometimes our clients will say something so profound that catches us off guard.
Yeah.
Right. So one of my clients of about, 2, 3 weeks ago said to me, self-care is remembering the self. And I was like, wow, right? And that is how mindfulness shows up when we are battling burnout physically. Self-care is remembering self, calling ourself into attention, calling ourself into focus. Yeah. All right. Sleep. Sleep is important. How are we going to address burnout physically? Sleep. Sometimes we need to put that phone down. We need to log off Netflix, Disney Plus, whatever your thing is right before going to bed. You got to put it down. All right. Nutrition and hydration. All right. That is a big thing. What are you consuming? What are you eating? What are we allowing into our bodies that is not good for us? What is that snack that you shouldn't be eating consistently, but we're eating it all the time? I'll admit, I am the cookie monster.
Yeah.
I am the cookie monster.
As a chocolate chip guy, eh?
Yeah. Oh man, listen. And you know what I discovered? So we're a little off topic, but I had boys weekend with my son last week, or 2 weeks ago rather. I went to Walmart and I saw Pillsbury cookies that you can put in the oven, a pack of 24 for $5. I was like, where has this been all my life? Where has this been? And I bought two. And it
Oh,
was baked. Yeah, man. We baked that on Saturday and it was done by Monday. I am a cookie monster. I have no shame in admitting it. But what we consume impacts us.
mhm.
You know what I mean? When we eat late, have you ever eaten so late you wake up in the morning and you can feel what you ate inside? You burp, you can hear it, you can smell that coming out. Like those kind of things, it matters. What we eat, what we consume, it matters. And here's another thing, taking breaks. Taking breaks. There's this book, Deep Work by Carl Newport. And he created, or not necessarily created, but he speaks to this strategy with doing work that I incorporated for a period of time, and I saw it experience great things with it. He talked about, working intentionally for 90-minute blocks of time. So working for 90 minutes and then taking, a 20-minute break and then going again for 90 minutes. And during that 90 minutes, we're not on our phones, we're not answering emails. We are intentionally focusing on what we need to focus on at that time for 90 minutes. And then for that 20 minutes of time, we're taking a break. We're going to go watch a show. You can go read, you can go for a walk, you can stretch, whatever it is you need to do to take a break, do that. All right. And so I think like that is a great tool to incorporate when we talk about taking breaks and managing our burnout, because burnout will communicate to us, go, go, go. Burnout won't let you take a break. Burnout will tell you you got to be here, there, and everywhere. Why? Because we don't want to disappoint. We don't want to disappoint people. So burnout communicates messages and narratives that impact our physical health. And then lastly, addressing mental burnout with mindfulness, reframing negative thoughts. What are we thinking about as it regards to ourselves? When we are experiencing burnout and disappointment, what are we telling ourselves? What are we communicating to ourselves? What is the relational health you have with yourself?
I
What is
think
it? Yeah, go ahead, Josh. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think for me, one of the thoughts is like, oh, I can't handle it, right? I'm
Mm,
weak. And I compare myself to people on Instagram sometimes who are like crushing it with business and all that kind of stuff.
mm,
If I'm in a state of burnout, my negative thoughts are like, well, yeah, you're just weak.
yeah,
You can't do it. You're not strong enough, right?
right.
So I have to reframe those thoughts of like, no, I can do it. I just my body is giving me indication that hey, I need to rest for a bit. Let me get
Right.
my energy back. Let me put up some good boundaries as you're talking about here, and then I could do that. But I
Mhm.
really like that reframing negative thoughts. It's been super helpful for me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, as you even said that, one of the things that was coming to my mind is, it's the aspect of comparison. These are the themes that burnout taps into and exploits for us internally, and which also will show up externally,
Yeah.
right? So establishing healthy boundaries. What do I need to say no to? I see it in the comments, have you had a hard time saying no to people? What do we need to say no to? Do we need to honor our emotional, physical, and mental capacity and bandwidth?
Yeah.
Right? How are we showing up for ourselves? Right? Establishing, or rather practicing gratitude. Practicing gratitude is huge. That is partnered with reframing negative thoughts. What are we saying to ourselves? What are we acknowledging? What are the good things that we are taking the time to acknowledge?
Yeah.
Right? And then lastly, that self-compassion aspect, offering ourselves compassion, offering ourselves grace. I think I saw it in the chat, someone was talking about self-love and acceptance, being able to offer themselves grace, right? What are we saying? Again, what are we saying to ourselves? How are we showing up for ourselves?
Very good.
Right? I'm gonna read some things in the chat. I see quickly. My negative thoughts unfortunately come from my environment, and then I end up internalizing and thinking, yeah,
Those are
burnout
that-
does that.
those are really good
There's that.
ones that we're going to
Mhm.
talk about this idea of environment and
Yeah.
work and community.
Mhm.
Coming up. So I love that these questions are already coming because it's like they're anticipating where we're about to go. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we'll get to
Love
there.
that. Someone else said, it's hard taking a break from work because there's so much before going on vacation, we get everything's done. Yeah, yep. And what I hear you communicating is like transition. Burnout, that's another area burnout will show up when we are about to transition or experiencing a transition. Burnout will show up there. It'll communicate, we need to get X, Y, and Z done before that transition is done, before leaving, whatever the case may be. Maybe we don't have to do that. Maybe there's certain things that can be done later. And when we say later, maybe the next day, or maybe when in your context, coming back from vacation. Who knows? Who knows? So here we're talking about now burnout and self-love and acceptance. Okay, burnout and self-love and acceptance. Here's another working definition we're going to talk about. When we talk about the connection between burnout and self-love and acceptance, it's the negative influence that prolonged stress and exhaustion can have on an individual's ability to value themselves and accept their own worth, leading to decreased self-esteem, increased self-criticism, and the difficulty to recognize one's strengths and accomplishments. Okay. Burnout impacts our ability to offer self-love and acceptance, offer self-love and acceptance results in the creation of false, unhealthy narratives and core beliefs about ourselves. Okay? That aspect of core beliefs, so things like shame, the need to assimilate, right? Burnout impacts how we see ourselves and also creates unhealthy habits and unhealthy narratives and core beliefs about ourselves, right? What are some things that are that is impacting your self-love? What are some narratives? What are some core beliefs that you have about yourself? If you're comfortable sharing, you can put in the chat. What is that, what is that thing that you are avoiding? What is that thing that you constantly say to yourself that is unhealthy or negative? You can either put in chat or just take the time and sit with that and reflect. What do I say to myself that is unhealthy, that isn't promoting self-love? So when we talk about, self-love and acceptance, there's something called 6 pillars of self-esteem. Okay. It's personal integrity, self-acceptance, self-responsibilities, self-assertion, living consciously, and living purposefully. These are what we call the 6 pillars of self-esteem. All right. Burnout impacts your sense of agency, right? Burnout impacts your sense of agency. It leaves you feeling powerless. It leaves you feeling ashamed at times. It leaves you feeling guilty, right? So how do we address burnout with self-love and acceptance? Here's the first part. It's the aspect of identify critical consciousness, right? So this is reflecting from it again from an interrogative standpoint on our awareness of our reality of burnout, right? How are we burnt out? What is causing that? What environment do I feel the most burnt out in? You know, Josh talked about body care. What shows up in your body when you enter certain environments, right? What thoughts are we having when we enter certain environments or when we're having conversations with certain individuals? This is that identifying aspect, critical consciousness, being aware of where we are, our reality, and asking our present reality questions. And then the next part, so after we identify, we're going to respond. We're responding with positive self-esteem. We're going to respond to the burnout as it is. So what does that look like, right? What does responding look like? Asking those questions, but also challenging what is and isn't being communicated to you. And then what do I need to give myself? Building that positive self-esteem. What do I need to give myself? What do I need to acknowledge? How do I need to respond in this moment? Do I need to do that? Do I need to go there? Do I need to answer that email? Do I need to answer this phone call right now? Do I have to show up at this event? Right? This is where we start giving ourselves permission to actually do the thing we want to do, where we are no longer ignoring or abandoning ourselves, right? No longer ignoring or abandoning our wants and our needs. And then lastly, we're going to live thinking critically, right? This aspect is the integrity of healthy self-esteem and the ability to experience self-love and acceptance. So for us to live, we have to identify, we have to respond, and this is where we incorporate boundaries. This is where we incorporate healthy boundaries and we stick to them, right? Boundaries has kind of been this cliche saying buzzword nowadays, but there are actual benefits to boundaries. It'll work if you work it. Boundaries will work if you work it. If you remain disciplined, offering yourself compassion and saying, this is what I need to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And I'm doing this for me. This is what I need. I see some things in the chat. We're gonna read some things in the chat real quick. In terms of service provider standpoint, burnout impacts my view of my effectiveness. Yeah, if my clients don't respond to me in a positive manner, which causes more. Yep, yep. Um, that sounds okay. Josh is responding. Yeah, I love what we're talking about in the chat there. This is how we can manage. It's not the only way, but this is some of the ways where how we can manage burnout from a self-love and acceptance aspect. Identify, respond, live.
Yeah.
All right. Identify, respond, live. So last slide on this topic of self-love and acceptance, I want to introduce you guys something called the love ethic. And this came from a book by Bell Hooks. I have it here. You can't see it, but I'll read the title. Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem. All right. And in this book, she talks about the love ethic and she highlights, 5 aspects of self-love: self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, self-assertion, and purposeful living. right? When we start to incorporate these aspects, when we start to look at how we can offer ourselves self-love and acceptance, it's through self-awareness. It's through self-acceptance where you acknowledge that you're on your own side, that you are no longer abandoning or splitting or dividing ourselves, that we're going to tackle burnout from a holistic perspective. The whole me, the entire me is going to challenge this burnout, right? The willingness to experience all your emotions and behaviors, self acceptance. We're not ignoring the things that we are feeling. We're not ignoring the things that we're thinking about, our behaviors. We're going to acknowledge the things that we do like, but also the things that we don't like that's been caused by burnout. And then we're going to treat ourselves with kindness. Treating ourselves with kindness is important. How we respond to ourselves is important. If other people don't respond to you, you respond to you. Mm, yeah.
Oh,
So before we
yeah.
talk about burnout and community, we're going to check in with ourselves real quick. Go ahead, Josh. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to do I know this is a lot of information
Mm,
coming at you, and even as it came to my mind is maybe some people are experiencing burnout right now. Sometimes information, taking in is difficult. So we're gonna do a little just check-in, a little reflection time. And Nigel, I was thinking what we could also do because it is a lot of information, even though it's good
mm,
information, maybe we could just do like a one piece kind of takeaway for
yeah.
each section that we've covered.
Yeah.
Um, just as a kind of little summary before we head into our last section, which is
Absolutely.
going to be great. Um, so if you're feeling good, if you're feeling like everything is going well so far, you can put Josh and Nigel are the best in the chat, or just do a thumbs up, or
Thumbs up.
just
Yeah.
kind of check in. Maybe you can even say how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And as you're doing that, I'm gonna start with kind of just giving a takeaway for the sections of
Yeah.
mine that I've covered so far. So for the spiritual, again, I decided that I wanted to go with the soul so it could fit everyone. And that soul
Mhm.
is, man, it is what makes us us. It impacts our entire being. And so one of the things that I think could be a takeaway is just being mindful of your entire system.
Yeah.
If you notice on you're becoming less yourself. People are like, "Oh, you're not yourself anymore." If you feel yourself on to that core just being drained,
Mhm.
it's probably an indication that burnout's happening and maybe some changes need to happen, right?
Yeah.
Some really taking care of yourself, really advocating for yourself. So that's that kind of soul piece, right? Am I affected on such a deep level? And really, like, what kind of change do I need to make? For body care, some takeaways for body care is just being aware of how these stressors impact your body. Am I with that image, am I up all the time? Am I anxious? Am I stressed? Am I angry? Am I irritable, right? Is there a cycle where I'm like that for so long and then come into crashing, right? So noticing what's going on in your body and then doing those things that are going to allow your body to be like, okay, we're
Mhm.
safe. We have a break. So that's sleeping, eating,
Mhm.
doing some breathing exercises, doing some muscle releasing exercises, because those are going to tell your nervous system, hey, we're okay. We just need to regulate. We just need to take a break. So, really doing some intentional body care daily. And the more you do that, the more your body's able to be like, okay, there's no bear in the woods. We're okay. Let's regulate. Let's start to feel like we're ourselves again, start to thrive. So, Nigel, what about for you? Some maybe takeaways for mindfulness and self-love and acceptance.
Yeah, for mindfulness, I think one of the takeaways is understanding that mindfulness is holistic, right? It's about ourself emotionally, physically, mentally. It is holistic in nature. right? So it's that interrogative aspect. When we are being mindful, we're asking ourselves some hard questions and we're providing answers, some hard answers to those questions as well. And it's understanding, that in order for us to be where we want to be or challenging burnout, we have to be self-aware. Being self-aware is the catalyst for change. It's a catalyst for growth. So that's mindfulness. And then, we just talked about self-love and acceptance. I think the takeaway is respond or identify, respond, live, right? Identify with critical consciousness, respond with positive self-esteem, and then live, thinking critically, right? When we incorporate that aspect of of identifying, responding, and then living, we are being intentional with choosing ourselves. We are being intentional with making the changes that we want to experience, we want to see, and
Wow.
allowing ourselves to actually, we are giving ourselves permission.
Wow. Nigel, you're
Mhm.
you're hitting me deep with that one. I was just about to say something, Nigel, that you pointed out that I think our listeners need to hear is that you're finally, maybe for the first time, feeling some sort of permission to take
Yeah.
care of yourself. You
Uh,
deserve it. Whether you've been in a full-time job, whether you're a single parent at home, whether it's family stuff that's been causing burnout, whether
mhm.
you're stuck in that cycle of saying yes all the time or the negative thoughts, this might be a sign or a permission that you're finally getting to know that you matter and your health matters and that you deserve to maybe step into this again, focus on self for a bit, right? What does it look like to love yourself? What does it look like to care for yourself? And
Mhm.
from a body level, on a emotional level, on a mindful level, on a self-esteem level, right? Yeah. I like what someone put in the chat of just being honest of how this session has helped so far in terms of being like, hey, I think I am experiencing burnout and really just allowing that sense of, maybe reframing some of the thoughts that it's like, oh, I'm just selfish. And that's
Mhm.
not the case. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to transition into our last section. I have a sense that this is something that people are experiencing a lot and
Yeah.
maybe have a lot of questions about. So this is going to be some good information shared here of burnout and community. Again, feel free to put some questions in the chat as we go through this, and there'll be time at the end to answer some questions. So Nigel, why don't you take us away with
Yeah,
burnout in?
absolutely. So burnout in community, there are different aspects of community, different things that fit under, or different diets that fit under that aspect of community. I'm going to talk about family real quick. Family burnout refers to the impact on an individual's well-being, whether that's mom, dad, daughter, son, or even extended family members, that bleeds over or overflows into the overall family unit, which leads to strained relationships, decreased emotional availability, and the decreased overall satisfaction with family life,
Mm,
right? When we are experiencing burnout, within the family aspect and the family, community, communal aspect, it's more difficult for us to navigate because these are individuals that we may be seeing every single day, right? And I think that probably adds to why burnout has such a probably a greater impact in family dynamics, because we see them every single day. And then there's so many different layers that intersect in that family unit, different responsibilities, different likes, different wants, different perspectives. And then as well, power dynamics, mom and dad versus son or daughter, or dad versus son, mom versus daughter, different power dynamics that intersect, that creates burnout. Yeah. So burnout impacts your relational health. All right. When we're talking about family dynamics, it impacts your relational health. Primary impact is the basic capabilities that you develop to form and maintain relationships. opportunities you have in your family, neighborhood, and school, right? Burnout impacts how we decide to show up in our community and in our family dynamic. It impacts our relational health, right? It impacts how we feel, or it communicates a false narrative of how we feel about family members or how we feel about certain communal spaces that we are a part of and that we partake in. Also thinking about it from secondary aspect, it impacts increased anxiety, sleep problems, depression, the development of the brain, right? These are ways your relational health, when impacted by burnout, these are the impacts that it could possibly have. Or for some of us, it may have that, right? If we are in stressful environments at home, sleep is one of the things that does get impacted, right? Anxiety is one of the things that does get impacted. If it's a little child, the development of their brain. One of the ways to find that out or to discover that is something called an ACE score, adverse childhood experiences. It's a questionnaire with 10 questions that you can give to anyone under the age of 18, and they ask a lot of intrusive questions, essentially about your childhood experiences. But depending on the score, it will communicate the impact traumatic experiences in your childhood has had on you, and also the development of the brain, right? What we experience in our community has an internal impact and external impact on how we see yourself and how we experience and manage burnout. Yeah. And then lastly, on this area of family dynamics, how do we address burnout through family dynamics in our community? So there's one area of open communication. What does that look like practically? Check-ins. How are we checking in our family dynamics? What does that look like? Is that happening? Right? This is where there's honest and open communication within the family dynamic, where everyone can experience or express concerns, feelings, and needs without judgment.
Mm.
And I want to highlight that, without judgment, because for a lot of us, burnout is experienced because of the judgment we've received when we took in the time to be brave and experience, or rather express, our needs and wants and concerns.
Mhm.
Shared responsibilities. What does that look like practically? Household responsibilities based off of strengths and comfortability, right? This is where the distribution of household responsibilities are shared equally and can prevent burnout of that workload. So if you're coming home from work and then have to cook and clean and do laundry, put the kids to bed if you have kids, prep for the next thing, that's 5 things I just listed right there. And if you work a typical 9 to 5, that hour, that time frame from when you get home to when you sleep is not as long as we would like it to be. That then impacts our sleep and creates an unhealthy cycle that by the time we get to the weekend, we are burnt out. We are tired, right? Protecting home environment. What does that look like practically? What we do, no matter the temperature of external circumstances. Protecting the home environment is creating a culture that benefits the overall dynamic holistically. Everyone benefits from that culture. What does the culture of your home look like? What does the temperature of your home feel like? How is the culture of your home managing burnout? What does that look like? Right? It's creating a culture that nurtures and honors where the family is holistically and where shift needs to happen. Okay. Promote flexibility. Now, this one is a little bit hard for me as well, because I don't like, being flexible. If you told me something, we're gonna do that. especially if you change it last minute, and that leaves me flustered. Like, I don't like that. But what does that look like for us, practically? Addressing and determining what is important right now and where an individual may be emotionally or mentally in that moment, right? That's what managing burnout can look like practically in the home dynamic. What is important right now? Where is this person right now emotionally? Are they at a 20? Are they at a 60? Are they at 50? When they come home, what do they have to give? And then we're managing that, right? So this is where the accommodation of a change of duty within the home may come, right? This is where we are reevaluating what responsibilities and needs are in the home. Where do we need to shift? Where do I need to show up? What does that look like? Celebrating achievements. I feel like that's a little bit self-explanatory, but it's the acknowledgement and the celebration to that builds cohesion, right? That builds connection. What are we celebrating at home? How are we celebrating at home? How are we celebrating in our community? Burnout gives us and creates narratives that prevents us from acknowledging things that are going well, things that we are doing well. Celebrating achievements combats against that. It acknowledges what we're doing well. It acknowledges small achievements, big or small. It takes the time to acknowledge that, offering deep appreciation to ourselves. That's what celebrating achievement does. And then lastly, cultivating connection. What does that look like practically? Hobbies, activities, shared meals. What do we like to do as a family that prevents burnout? What do we like? What do we enjoy? Is that going to the movies? Is that board games? Is that meaningful conversations? Is that lending a helping hand and doing the chores to make the load lighter and to finish quickly? What does that look like? Building connections provides emotional support, which decreases the impact of burnout. All right. When we're managing burnout in community, we need community. Managing burnout through community, how burnout impacts community, we need community in order to manage it. Yeah.
Nigel, we have a great question here.
Yeah.
Look in the chat there. It says, how does cultural or ethnic background play into this? Now that
Mm-hmm.
I'm married, I can definitely create my own family narrative. But growing up in a Caribbean household with lots of trauma, some of these things would not have worked for my black mama. Laugh out loud.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And
thought-
one of the things that I'm hearing there is you're acknowledging where a lot of things that have experienced or where the conflict is, you're acknowledging the root. That came from childhood, right? I see you acknowledging, does the culture and ethnic play into that? This is where we now acknowledge the fact that like I have permission. My childhood was my childhood, but it doesn't have to be my present. I have permission to make those changes and understanding that you said you're married, so you're not married to your mom, right? You're married to someone, and because we are now married to someone else, we have that opportunity to build that connection. We have the opportunity to protect the home environment. We have the opportunity to have open communication, right? So we're looking and assessing what are my needs? Because my needs may not align with cultural ethnic standards or backgrounds.
Tough.
Yeah.
Something I'm noticing, Nigel and Rochelle, is that with my clients from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, something beautiful I'm seeing, and maybe you're
Mhm.
experiencing it too, Nigel, is that they're taking this step of vulnerability into building a new narrative, right?
Yeah.
Not that they're abandoning culture or tradition, but they're recognizing, okay, I grew up in this home. This is what it was like for my parents and me. This is what it was like for even my parents and them. And
Mhm.
it's something that I am stepping into this vulnerability to change, right? So
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. I'm noticing how much cultural and ethnic background has played into my clients in
Mhm.
the areas of not being able to share emotions or
Yeah.
not able to share vulnerability. And what my clients are doing, as you said, Rochelle, is that I'm creating my own narrative. right?
Mhm.
I'm creating, and some of these people aren't married or have families, but they're still stepping out and being like, I need a new narrative. I'm
Yeah,
still proud of my background, but I'm stepping into a new narrative.
I
So,
love that. I love what you said, the vulnerability to create a new narrative. I think
yeah,
that's spot on. Spot
absolutely.
on. Mhm.
So we're at the home stretch. This is this last community part of what Nigel shared with family. I have a feeling that people experience, and this one as well. We're talking about here. The community is the idea of just society, and so realizing, okay, what has marked society in the past decades? And there's a quote by the Burnout Society. It's a book that I did some research in, and it says neurological illness such as depression, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, BPD, and burnout syndrome marked the landscape of pathology at the beginning of the 21st century. So basically saying there that we're seeing all these neurological illnesses come forth. And I had to start to wonder like, okay, why? And something that they shared, and I want you to see if these words resonate with you. It says society has been introduced in the past decades to overproduction, overconsumption, overachievement, and overcommunication. Oh, there's just like a massive stimuli coming at us. There's everything at us at once, and we're expected to keep up with it or consume it or so we have enough money to consume it. And all this over stuff, as cheesy as it sounds, it makes us overwhelmed. It overwhelms our system. One thing noticing is that we live in a society that's an achievement society. Maybe some of you feel that you always have to do more. Your work is expecting you to do more. Your partner is expecting you to do more. Your parents are expecting you to do more. You yourself are expecting yourself to do more, right? Some really interesting from burnout to breakthrough, some statistics is the cost of stress and burnout to North American companies is estimated and ranged between 120 and 300 billion. 58% of working Canadians report excessive stress every day at work. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're feeling it. One US study found that work stress contributed to 120,000 deaths per year. Right. Stress is a big killer. And this is why we're talking about managing burnout holistically. These are conversations that need to happen. Psychology Today in 2019 reported that healthcare providers noticed that burnout has reached epidemic proportions, with close to 50% of people identifying with burnout symptoms. Maybe that's half of us here. And burnout is responsible for up to half of all employee decline. Employees are working more hours for little to no additional pay, recognition, sense of appreciation, and so they're searching for new jobs. And what I've seen is they get into a new job and it's the same kind of thing. Does this resonate with you? You know, you can put in the chat or it's something you can reflect on. Does this go, go, go and not being appreciated for it resonate with you? Go ahead, Nigel. What we're seeing is the big one that stands out in terms of burnout in society is work, right? Work life. Someone had mentioned here being a service provider and experiencing this burnout cycle at work. And here's some of the things that lead to burnout at work and that we need to pay attention to is in terms of resources and communication, limited communication or feedback. Here's what you're doing well. Here's what you need to do. You're kind of meant to figure it out on your own. Not enough training, outdated technology and equipment. You're trying to do something massive with, equipment that doesn't allow you to complete it. And so that leads to feelings of frustration and burnout. Control. So maybe your ideas aren't being heard. Maybe you're not able to have some of that autonomy at work where you're like, yep, here's my skills, here's my expertise. Maybe you're being micromanaged, right? In terms of workload, this is one I find people deal with a lot is these expectations, right? Unreasonable expectations, unreasonable workloads. You have to start working overtime and maybe not getting paid for it, right? In terms of now you're taking work home with you. In terms of work relationships, maybe you're noticing again a boss that's so hard on you. There's no breaks, right? People taking credit for what you're doing. And again, there's just a lack of support from your colleagues. And then job conditions. This was a big one. Not getting paid for what you're worth, not getting paid for what you need to be able to support yourself back home, right? And dealing with challenging people at work. So this is our work thing, and again, I'm sure this resonates with some of us. But other places, so work is a big one, and I wanted to highlight it because we spend a lot of our time at work, but there's other places that we experience these stressors or causes of burnout, and that's lack of support for single parents. Maybe that's something that you've recognized in your life. Systemic financial constraints, so just always feeling like you have these constraints on you where again you're not paid enough for what you're worth. You're stuck in that cycle. Mental and physical health issues on a collective level. So access to mental health that's affordable, or access to mental health just in general. This one I hate with a passion. It's grind and hustle culture. I hate it. And it seems like here in the West, we are just all about it. And so that's a huge, huge, huge stressor. And then one that we want to talk about, or just I want to highlight, and this is an ethic at Soul Care Christian Counseling, is the impact of racism. Something that many people of different backgrounds and even the Black community experience is highlighted in this diagram. This is what we experience in society: unmitigated racism, intergenerational stress and trauma. So what we're noticing that someone had put in the chat: cultural background and things with family, intergenerational stress and trauma. Um, in terms of the health, do you just want to go back for a second, Nigel, there? Just back one. Yeah. In terms of, issues with health, for communities of ethnic backgrounds, and again, oppression that they experience. Maybe you're someone who is of different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, and this is something you're experiencing. But we want to be mindful of there's many reasons in society that lead to our burnout. Go ahead, Nigel. So is healing possible? It's hard to change society at the level that we want to see, in the time frame that we want to see. And so what do we need to do to heal? This is kind of where we go with these pillars. Begin with yourself. By going through the pillars, these are areas of your health that maybe are finally addressed. Do they deserve a little more attention? When we were doing this, Nigel mentioned something, that burnout is an indicator for change. It's also that permission. Hey, you have permission right now, you that are watching this, to take care of yourself and not have to feel selfish for it, right? Find a good support system of like-minded people who might be going through the same situations, right? In this way, we get a sense of advocacy, we get accountability, we get the sense of being able to reflect and be vulnerable, and that could even lead to action. Hey, how are we as a group going to step into a better life for ourselves? Support is so needed when we're facing burnout. The one cool thing that came up here too is adopting a narrative of freedom that motivates us to make these shifts. So maybe we've been stuck in that narrative of people pleasing, of never being able to say no, of just being for everyone else, and that drains us. But that's not freeing. That keeps us in this cycle of burnout. So what does it look like to change our narrative, right? Start to think about that. Start to be like, no, here's some things that I want, and I might have to change some things around. I might have to put in some boundaries. You matter, and so your narrative matters, right? This is some of the stuff that Nigel was talking about in mindfulness. One of the things that Gabor Mate shares is 3 other ways that really help us in terms of addressing this on a maybe societal level, is the sense of awareness, right? What is going on? What in my life is causing stress? What is causing these up emotions, these down emotions, instead of me feeling like my feet are on the ground? Having that sense of awareness and seeing that other people are going through the same thing motivates us to step into change, right? The sense of autonomy. What boundaries do I have set up to care for myself that can help prevent burnout? So this is being an advocate of your own health and well-being, and not feeling selfish. as you step into those places, it's gonna impact others to start to care for themselves. We're seeing it grow now more and more of as people come together, there's this sense of strength when it comes to, hey, how do we heal ourselves? How do we heal our society? So yeah, don't think that just your choice, it does won't make a big impact. It will as you step into who you are. The last one that's kind of fits into what I was saying is attachment. Which of the relationships in my life, and this might be big for some of you, do I need to remove? What relationships in my life do I need to shift around? Or what relationship do I need to add? Do I need to make friends with people who actually let me be myself, who allow me to be vulnerable, who allow me to share? Am I just around people who bring me down all the time? Do I need to make a shift in this area? Because the attachment relationships you're in will either help or hinder you. And again, as we're talking about caring for yourself holistically, this is an area that matters for you. We want to see you healthy, and so we want to see your relationships around you be ones that can promote that, right? At the bottom, what I put is the pillars. If we want to see burnout change at a personal level that impacts our society, these pillars are top notch. I'm not even just saying that as biased as I work at soul care, but focusing on spiritual care in your soul, focusing on your body care, focusing on mindfulness, focusing on self-love and acceptance, focusing on community, investing into organizations or people who have, whether a business or Instagram page or something that promotes these things. Really, you don't have to reinvent the wheel or start it yourself. There's many good people who have things started, and really showing them your support, advocating alongside of them is going to create this societal shift. So there's so much you can do, and it starts with really that caring for yourself. This is the part of the time we just want to say thank you so much for um again really sitting through this. I know that this can be difficult because it sometimes comes this thing of like, hey, I have so many things I need to do now. Like I'm noticing burnout, and there can be this anxiety of trying to take care of everything. And we wanted to help with that. So that's why we have recorded this. Don't feel
Mhm.
like you have to, internalize everything now.
Yeah.
We've recorded this, that you're going to get it. We're going to give you the slides again. Um, this is something that takes small steps.
Yeah.
Start with getting your body safe. Start with getting in that place where your body feels like I don't have to be in threat system all the time. That could just be looking like sleep, some nutrition, some
Mm-hmm.
eating, some removing yourself from situations. This matters for you. And so taking those small steps so that you don't have to implement all this at once. We don't want working on burnout to lead to burnout, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So at this time, I'm going to stop recording. So if you do have